House is an NBC drama starring Hugh Laurie. No, wait. Hausu is a movie. Okay. It's directed by a guy who used to make Japanese TV commercials. Now, I don't know if you've seen any Japanese TV commercials, but if you have, then you have a little bit of an idea of what you're in for. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Girls go on vacation in house, but house is haunted. You didn't have time to stop me, that's the story. But there are a few ways in which House manages to be, on one hand, a very successful parody of the horror genre, while at the same time being one of the best, most effective movies in the genre. For a start, it stops pretending like any of these horror movie characters are actually characters. The beautiful one is called Gorgeous, the fat one is called Mac, the one that knows Kung Fu is called Kung Fu. This is Smurfs level naming. The movie completely owns its flat characters. To my understanding, most of the traps in the house are inspired by the greatest childhood fears of the director's daughter, like having to lift a heavy mattress and have it fall on you, or being slapped in the hands by your piano teacher. That's probably what makes them feel weirdly genuine and not just random bullshit the director was looking at that moment. The first thing that greets you is this really simple, catchy melody. This fucking song never stops. I swear this thing plays over 90% of the movie. Sometimes it's nostalgic. Sometimes it's jolly. Sometimes it's smooth. But it's always there. Except for very few instances, like when the character Kung Fu does Kung Fu, she has her own theme. Like ba-da-ba-doo, 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 ba-da-ba-da-ba. This movie just doesn't let you go. There's a different buildup of intensity when you watch a movie that hasn't been quiet for more than 2 total seconds since it started. Apocalypse Now kind of does something similar with sound effects. In the first hour or so of the movie, you hear these really obnoxiously loud helicopters all the goddamn time. But as the journey deeper into the jungle progresses, you start hearing the quiet, natural ambience, and it becomes eerie. They're all on their own now, and you feel it. It's effective not just in telling a meaningful part of the story, but also in provoking an emotional reaction with sound design. Hausu's use of music follows the same general idea. The music by itself is not conventionally scary. It's cool, funky, even pleasant, but that's also what the house is. Using silence to build up tension works and makes for a more balanced movie, sure, but House takes a different approach by using excessive sounds and constant rhythm to overwhelm the audience and deprive them of quiet and rest. Just like the characters in the film who were all just waiting for their vacation and are now going through this insane experience. This movie stresses me out. Okay, they introduce the characters in school, the song is playing. This is the main one, she fights with her dad, the song is still playing. She finds a cat, she loses the cat. They have to go on vacation, where's the cat? He's already on the train. Now there's a different song playing, but it's still just as catchy. As sure as cherries were made. Now we're back to the other song, and they're there. The cat is already famous there. Look at this, is this where they are? No, idiot, that's just a painting. This is where they are. But then you realize that the background is a painting, like a big Wizard of Oz type set. This girl says she loves watermelons, then she turns into a watermelon. The hostess served the watermelon to the other girl. The song is still fucking playing. It goes on like this. I have no idea how this movie got made with the budget it did. Apparently the executives at Toho greenlit this because they were looking to make something like Jaws. I don't know which cut of Jaws they watched in Japan. I guess what they mean is that it's both scary and entertaining. But that's beside the point right now. Anyway, let's shift our attention from a Japanese movie that won't shut the fuck up to a Japanese movie that won't do anything but shut the fuck up. And for this part, to set the quiet, peaceful tone, I'm gonna have to do my Thomas Flight impression. Are you ready? The Whispering Star is so quiet. There is very little dialogue and all of it is spoken in whispers. Not everything that should make a sound does. This future is so sterile and comfortable that they have the convenience of soundproof pens, floors, and ladders. Watch this in a very quiet, dark room for the best experience. I had to pause a file transfer because my hard drive writing itself in the corner of the room made the noise too distracting. A noise that I normally don't even register. So this is not a Doritos kind of movie. But the silence is what makes this film such a special experience. Suddenly, the sound of crickets on a planet is lively against the complete dead silence of space. The few sound effects that are used are very impactful. They draw attention to mundane things and make them feel special and cherished, like stepping on an empty can, which usually would be an annoying sound, but now feels so comforting and familiar to the audience's lonely ears. So you never question why the character doesn't remove the can that's stuck under his shoe. You get it. And I didn't even mention yet the beautiful string music that plays only a small handful of very carefully chosen times and is just everything you need after so much silence. It's not loud, it's not full with all the sounds an orchestra could offer, but there's a richness to the sound that just keeps you company. This is probably the loneliest movie I've ever seen. It's like Jean Dillman in space. If you like slow transcendental films, you will probably enjoy this. If you don't like slow transcendental films, this might be the only transcendental style movie that you will enjoy. In contrast to the transcendental style, as Paul Schrader describes it, trying to be as non-expressive as possible, this movie is extremely expressive and imaginative while borrowing other transcendental techniques. It's a love-hate letter to the serene cinema of Yasujiro Ozu, and it keeps you longing, hungry to hear anything, just anything. I'll also say this, I have a sneaking suspicion that it was one of Hideo Kojima's inspirations when he made the popular video game Death Stranding. While very different in style, they share a wonderfully poetic premise of a delivery person connecting a lonely world by delivering packages. Also, there's a very important beach. So if you like Death Stranding, you'll definitely get something out of this. It's a Strand type movie. These two films use audio extremely effectively to enrich their point, by way of depriving the audience of something we will naturally crave after a while. One deprives us of noise, and the other deprives us of quiet. In an ideal environment, cinema has near total control of two of your senses. It can't be a sensory deprivation tank, but it can play with your senses in a way. Directors do this with many other elements of the senses that the film engages. We talked about sound, but what about sight? Well, the most obvious element to play with in sight is color. Black and white used to be the only option back in the old days, but as color technology advanced, filmmakers had to figure out the best ways to use it. In The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is already in Oz by page 4. It's like a girl, she lives in a farm, there's a cyclone, and that's all you need to know. In the screen adaptation, we spend about a quarter of the time in Kansas. There's a whole little storyline there, there's a bunch of characters and misadventures, and arguably the best song in the movie, and it's all in monochrome. Wizard of Oz was not the first color movie, but as far as I know, it was the first to use the novelty of color in a meaningful way. Real life was always in color, as hard as it is to believe, but The Wizard of Oz made its viewers settle into watching a black and white movie, thus making it even more impactful when the Technicolor kicked in. And when it kicked in, they really used it to the max. In the book, Dorothy gets magic silver slippers, but gray shoes, shiny as they may be, are not going to serve the desired effect as well as saturated ruby red ones. See, even Powell and Pressburger made a classic masterpiece called The Red Shoes and not the fucking gray shoes. The magical world is a world of color, so the most iconic, important magical items are the most boldly colorful. But of course, deprivation has to be used in a smart way to be effective. Let's talk for a bit about one of the reasons Belfast didn't really work for me. So Belfast starts with semi-stock footage looking color shots of modern day Belfast. Then, as the film goes back to the time of the Troubles, it transitions into a mostly black and white presentation. The only color that you see is coming from fiction that young Kenneth Branagh consumes. The implication, of course, is that films and stories is what brings joy, fantasy, and escapism, or color, to the lives of these characters. One reason it wasn't impactful for me, I think, is it's used so often that you never really got to miss color. You barely even have time to get used to and live in the black and white world for a bit, and there's some other color shots again. It's not 1939 anymore. People are used to seeing color movies, so you really have to give the black and white time if you want the color to pop. Excessiveness is great, but it's most effective when it comes as a contrast to something. Remember The Whispering Star? Of course you do, you're not senile. The extreme quietness boldened the sound when it did come. Apocalypse Now settles you into loudness, then quiets down. The Wizard of Oz settles you into monochrome, then reveals spectacular colors. And sure, House does great by being intense in sound as a contrast to life, rather than as a contrast to a different part of itself, but it really is an extreme contrast to reality, in more ways than just the sound. You can't use the same logic when you make a basic black and white drama that's set in a realistic world. So if you want to make the color suddenly sting, you have to pick one place, two max, and pick them wisely. The second reason is the color imagery itself wasn't powerful. Just like House and The Whispering Star couldn't just turn the audio on and off randomly, they had to make sure that the actual sounds that they were using in the films were effective. Films that play with meaningful color need to make the color imagery itself striking. The Whispering Star also does this briefly, breaking the sepia tone presentation for one shot. It shows the main character walking through an open, windy field, followed by the horizon of the sea. Finally, over a half an hour into the film, she's about to meet another person. But a better example would actually be Schindler's List. You spend all this time in black and white in what is probably the most terrible time and place in recent history, trying to find some humanity. And then and that's all you have to say. In Belfast, there's nothing striking about the color imagery. I mean, besides the explosion, which is fine, it's an explosion. This is just Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in color. It's not even original footage. All due respect to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. You know, that's a good scene from that movie, I remember. It feels like a film school level choice to turn the color on and off to convey some simplistic metaphor. But credit where credit is due. This effect, that's neat. I like that. Better Call Saul did the same thing, but better. Pleasantville kind of did something like this, like a proto version of it for a shot and a half. But this is also pretty cool. It's a pretty good use of that effect. Another good example of withholding a different visual element from the audience is Mummy. In order to preserve Zack Snyder's creative vision, the 2014 French-Canadian film Mummy is presented in a mostly one-to-one perfect square aspect ratio. The cinematography is both beautiful and inherently uncomfortable. What it deprives you of is field of vision. The characters feel trapped. In the close-ups, you can barely see where they are. Hell, even in the wide shots, you barely see the space that's around them. Any chance of a panoramic view is blocked by these enormous black columns. So when things start to go well, and they finally feel free, you breathe easy with them. There's an almost physical sense of tension being released, until, of course, the moment is gone, and it feels more uncomfortable than ever before. I know that the changing aspect ratio is getting more presence within the popular film language, mostly because of the IMAX action scenes in big movies. I mean, it's sometimes kind of random with IMAX specifically. Shots just go back and forth for no apparent reason. What the hell is this, and why is it still happening in the year of our Lord 2025? Did you not figure out how to use the crop tool in Avid Media Composer? Because that would actually be an understandable explanation. But there are a lot of movies that do put a lot of care into switching aspect ratios to signal various things to the audience, including going for something extreme like Mommy. In the end, it's just another sensory element that the filmmaker has control over, and thus can put completely out of whack to mess with the audience. And for the right reasons and in the right context, it can be incredible. Abel Gance's Napoleon. Some people consider this use of the changing aspect ratio gimmicky, and fair enough, but I think, like The Wizard of Oz, it uses the feeling you get from experiencing the novel technological innovation to the benefit of the story. Can you imagine going to see this in a giant specialty theater with 3 screens, and for hours the film just plays normally like you're used to in the center screen, except with 2 ominously blank screens, one on each side. And then in the final 20 minutes, what I'm trying to say in this, my first essay-style video, is that films, being an audiovisual medium, have a great potential to mess with your senses. And I love it when filmmakers use it to the fullest extent, because it creates some of the most emotionally effective movies I've ever seen. The Red Shoes, Schindler's List, House, Apocalypse Now, The Whispering Star, The Wizard of Oz, Mummy, Napoleon. These films manipulate your senses to serve their story and show their creators' mastery of the audiovisual medium. Join me next time when I talk about the fucking smell-o-vision. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell. As I said, this is my first attempt at this kind of video, so I would love for you guys to join me, as well as leave some constructive criticism or words of encouragement in the comments. This topic has been very much close to my heart. House specifically really gave me the confidence to use non-stop music in my own short film, The Summoning of a Man to a Parking Lot. It's over at my production company's channel. I will link that on the screen. Please do check it out if you want. Thank you so much for watching.